Welcome back to Based MMA. In this video, I'm going to be ranting about the UFC Apex. And I know that many MMA YouTubers, especially MMA Guru, has already posted a video discussing why the UFC Apex is absolutely terrible. It's terrible for the future of the sport. It's not entertaining. You know, the UFC doesn't feel like they need to actually try with these cards. They don't try to stack these cards or at least put a recognizable, a good main event. I feel like more and more over the years now, they've gotten even more lazy with the Apex. Now we have Joe Pfeiffer versus Jack Hermanson headlining a fight night card. You have people like Imavov and Dolitzy headlining. Nothing against those guys, you know what I'm saying? They're probably gonna be future contenders. Who knows? But to be main events of fight nights is absolutely disrespectful, and because of that, it feels like the UFC is not trying. And I still felt the need to cover this because, man, there's a card right now, Joe Pfeiffer versus Jack Hermanson, and do I really feel like covering it? Do I really feel like making prediction videos about it? I mean, I know a lot of MMA YouTubers out there, especially the betting channels, they make videos about every card, which huge respect to them. I'm not a bettor, so I don't really make betting videos because, you know, I would feel like a fraud if I made betting videos and I don't bet myself, you know what I'm saying? So, but huge respect to them. I completely understand why they make videos for every single UFC card. But for us that we just enjoy these cards, and, you know, do I really enjoy this? Like, no, I'm not, you know, if I'm being honest, like I really don't enjoy them. I get it. You know, a lot of these fighters are making the UFC debut, and like, where are you going to put those fighters? You're not going to put them in pay-per-views. Not all these fighters are going to fit in pay-per-views or big fight nights. But in my opinion, it should be rare when the UFC goes to the Apex, maybe once a month or maybe twice a month at most. But when was the last time that the UFC went to an arena for a fight night? That was probably the event that I actually went live to watch, which was UFC Austin. And for UFC Austin, the UFC actually put a pretty decent card, a pretty decent fight night with Beneil Dariush versus Armin Tsarukyan, Bobby Green versus Jalen Turner, Davidson Figueroa versus Rafa. So they actually tried to put some recognizable names for that card. And I understand that it's not realistic for every UFC fight night card to be that way, to be stacked, but they should try harder, man. I mean, I get it. They stacked a lot of these pay-per-views like UFC 298, UFC 299, UFC 300, but I mean, UFC 300, it makes sense that that card would be stacked. But like UFC 299, you have guys like Curtis Blades versus Jelton Almeida. That would be a good main event of a fight night, in my opinion. Or a Peter Yan versus Song Yadong, that would be a good main event of a fight night. Like, why do you need to put them all on UFC 299 if you look at some of these fight nights and they're terrible? I mean, you have guys like Marcin Tybura versus Tai Tuivasa headlining a UFC fight night card. Like, what the fuck is that? Or you have, you know, Amanda Rivas versus Rose Namajunas, or even the March 2nd, which they were supposed to go to Saudi Arabia. They don't even have a main event yet, as far as I know, or they're probably gonna, you know, try to come up with some bullshit and put it. And because they know that these hardcore MMA fans, these hardcore UFC fans, just eat anything that the UFC gives them. And we have to make sure, as based MMA, as the based MMA community, that we don't accept these UFC fight night cards, that we don't accept these UFC Apex cards, because they're absolutely terrible. They're not entertaining. They feel like a chore to watch, man. When I put a UFC fight night card that I don't really care about, I mean, some of these fight night cards, they have like a couple of matchups that I actually care about, that I'm actually kind of excited for. But for most of these, I don't really care. So I'm casually watching it. But I just feel like, man, like, why does it feel like these cards are getting worse and worse and worse and worse? It's because they actually are getting worse. Like, if you look at some of these fight nights compared to the fight nights that we were getting last year, or even the year before that, or even during COVID, it's gotten worse and worse. And at this point, you know, we're out of the pandemic. Like, why is the UFC still going back to the Apex so much? You know why they're going back to the Apex? Because they're fucking lazy. Because they know that if they go to an arena, you're not going to sell an arena out with Joe Pfeiffer versus Jack Hermanson. That's the real reason why the UFC doesn't go back to arenas. Well, that's why they don't go to arenas every weekend. But like I said, there's nothing wrong with them going to the Apex once in a while. But for them to go every weekend and put these kind of cards is absolutely unacceptable. We need to make fucking videos about it, discussing why the UFC needs to stop going to the Apex. I get it. They did it for COVID when everything was locked down. And I'd rather, them have the UFC Apex than no UFC at all. But at least try with some of these cards. At least try to put decent main events and decent fights on these fight nights, because they really do feel like a chore to watch. And it actually makes me, less excited about the sport. And it clearly shows that the UFC is not in the business of attracting more UFC fans, but just keeping the hardcore MMA fans that are going to watch every sucky ass card because they love the sport so much. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, I completely understand why a lot of these YouTubers cover these cards from a betting perspective, but as an entertaining, as somebody, who like, I don't want to make these the reason why I don't want to make videos about these fight nights that I don't give a shit about is because you're going to tell in those videos that I don't really have the passion for it, that I'm not really that excited for it. And I'm not going to force myself to make that kind of content just because I'm a big UFC fan. Yes, I do watch these cards. I mean, I'm casually watching it right now, but am I really passionate about it? Absolutely not. And most of these guys are not either, but they make it because of betting videos, which I completely understand. But it's all UFC's fault, man. They need to try harder. They need to try harder with these cards. Like I said, I'm not being unrealistic. I'm not saying that every fight night card needs to be a pay-per-view stacked, absolutely amazing card. But you have guys like Curtis Bliss, who Jalton Almeida, those could headline a fight night. Peter Yan versus Song Yadong, that could be a good main event for a fight night. You don't need to put him. You don't need to stick. You don't need to stack UFC 299 to the gills when you have fight night cards that look absolutely sad, that are dry, that they suck. You know what I'm saying? They absolutely suck. So they need to do a better job of scheduling and planning these cards, and not just thinking about the pay-per-views. Look, I'm very happy that the UFC is stacking these pay-per-views. Don't get me wrong. The next couple pay-per-views are absolutely stacked and awesome, but it feels like we have to watch 3 lackluster cards to then get to a good pay-per-view that we actually care about. When in my opinion, maybe don't stack the pay-per-views as much. I'm not saying don't make UFC 297, all right? UFC 297 was awful. I'm not saying that. Put some good fights on the pay-per-views. Fights that matter. But also try to put good main events for these fight nights. And they used to do that, but it feels like this year they've been kind of ass. Besides Johnny Walker versus Magomed Ankalaev, okay, that was a decent main event. And actually, that was a pretty good card. But Imava versus Delizzi, that's a main event of a fight night. Joe Pfeiffer versus Jack Hermanson. Come on, dude. It feels like homework, guys. And like I said, we need to talk about it. If you have a small MMA channel, make a video discussing why you hate the Apex, why the Apex absolutely fucking sucks. If you're a big channel, well, I'm sure you've already made a video like the MMA Guru. But guys, let me know what you guys think. Do you guys absolutely hate the Apex as well? It feels like homework. I'm not going to make prediction videos for cards that I don't really give a shit about. That's the honest truth. So anyway, guys, please make sure to like and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.